Have you set up an LLC? You think you're protected? Well, think again. In fact, that's what I saw on Reddit when somebody posted that they had set up an LLC through one of those formation websites under the idea or with the idea that they're protected in the event of a lawsuit. You see, that's not the way limited liability companies work, okay? Limited liability companies help reduce liability, and yes, they can potentially provide asset protection for you in certain situations, but there are at least 5 specific ways a creditor can reach straight through a limited liability company and pop your liability asset protection shield and go after everything you own personally. And most business owners, like this individual on Reddit, they only find about these traps when the process server is standing at their door with knocking and saying, hey, you've been served. Well, here's what I'm going to do today in this video. I'm going to debunk this total shield myth and explain to you that yes, that shield is there, but it's only as strong as you are when it comes to maintaining that shield. So what we're going to be talking about is veil piercing and the personal negligence trap. And while being a LLC in and of itself will not provide you maximum protection unless you're doing the right things. So if you want to know how to actually build a defense that holds up to a court lawsuit, then stay tuned because that's what this video is about. All right, let's get started. Okay, so this happens all the time. I see it at my events. People come up to me and think, just because I have a limited liability company, I've set up one LLC here. So I have this LLC and I have a bunch of assets inside of it. That's a common example here. We got some houses and cash sitting inside of it. Or maybe somebody set up an LLC and this is their business right here and they're operating their business out of their limited liability company. In both these situations, they believe that if anything were to go wrong, that they're completely protected. But the problem is that the way in which creditors work through these companies and get after your personal assets is they're going to look many times about or at how you ran your LLC. And this is where the issue really starts to come into play and where your eyes are going to be opened up. So the first way in which people will break your LLC is through the standard process of what we refer to as co-mingling. And this is a killer for LLCs. And let me show you what I mean here. Let's assume that you have a business set up here. Here's your business. And then you have 2 other LLCs that you've set up for various things. Maybe they're rental limited liability companies. There's properties inside of here. All right. Now, let's say Sarah, right? She's down here. She owns all 3 of these companies, and she doesn't keep separate books for them because these LLCs are disregarded LLCs. She's the sole owner. And what she's done is she's fallen into this trap. Let's assume that this property here needs $5,000, but it doesn't have $5K. Sarah has $5K sitting in her business's bank account. So what she does is she just moves money over to this LLC to pay for the expense. Maybe we had to put on a new heating and cooling unit onto this property. So she moves the $5,000 over there to cover these expenses. Or she uses her personal credit card now to pay for the vehicle lease because her vehicle has leased a car for her business so she can drive around and look at her properties. But it's behind she's a month behind on payments, so she just whips out her personal card and uses it. Because at the end of the day, this is a trap people fall into. They look at this and they say, well, it's all my money. All of these entities here, it's all mine. So why does it matter? And you can easily fall into this, especially when you have 3 bank accounts with the same institution. Maybe all 3 are set up with Chase Bank, and you just start moving money around wherever it's needed. Well, here's the issue. This is referred to as alter ego, and it gives the judge a way then for them to pierce the veil of these companies. So for example, let's assume that Sarah here inside of her business now, let's say she enters into an agreement with a third party over here, a marketing company. Now, the marketing company doesn't do a good job at marketing her business, so she decides she's not going to pay them. Well, the marketing company then sues her for $75,000 and gets a judgment against her company. Now, if her company has very little in the form of assets to pay off this judgment, what they're going to then look to do is pierce the corporate veil, all right? So they're going to look at her bank statements. Then they're going to say, all right, so how's she been moving money around? And if they see in her bank statements that she's been rolling money over here, using personal cards to pay for the business lease, well, then the LLC shield is going to disappear and you become them 100% liable for your business. In fact, it can go even further than that. You see these other two companies over here, if she's moving money back and forth, then they can skip from here to here to here and go after those assets as well. So this type of commingling is a real danger for business owners, and it does not protect them in the event of a lawsuit. That is, their LLC is not going to protect them. So this idea that, hey, all I have to do is set up an LLC, it's wrong. How you run your LLC is critical. Okay, so let's talk about another example, and I hear this a lot all the time for business owners as well. So let's assume Sarah now in a new, let's call it Sarah 2. So Sarah 2 has her new business over here. And let's say she gets a vehicle in the name of her business. So she has this truck that she drives. All right. So she's in there. She drives her truck around for business. Now, she's involved in an accident. Let's say she's out driving on a country road and here's this big prized bull that's out there. And she runs into this bull. All right. That looks like a bull. I don't know, maybe cow, whatever. Now it's ground beef because she struck it with her truck because she wasn't paying attention. So she hits this car. Now this bull, and what she doesn't understand is that this bull that she just struck, hey, that's a Kobe bull. And what that means is that the value of that bull is $1 million. And so now they're going to sue. That is the farmer, okay, that owns this bull. He can no longer use it for services, right, to service the cows, to create more beef that he can sell, is going to sue her business. Now, in suing the business, they're also going to name someone else as a co-defendant. Yes, she was driving for business at the time in which she was involved in the accident, but the thing is that you're always going to be liable for your own torts, meaning since she was the driver of the truck that struck the bull, she becomes liable as well. So if you were to look at the pleadings, it would have the name of her business. Let's say it's all Jack's Real Estate. And then it would name also co-defendant Sarah. She's also a co-defendant. So they're going to go after both of them. Now, this is the problem that a lot of people have when they create limited liability companies. They think they're protecting themselves from this type of claim. Hey, this happened in the business. It's not me. You can't sue me. That's why I set up an LLC. But the reality is that when you're out there conducting activities on behalf of your business and you're negligent, you become personally liable as well, in addition to the business. And I see this a lot with real estate investors who try to do their own work, right? It's great you can save money rather than hire a contractor to come out and rehab your properties. But the risk you run is that if your tenants are ever injured, if a tenant's injured on the property and it can be shown that the injury was a result of the work that you did, then your LLC is no longer a shield for you. You become personally liable on that. So that's the second issue we have, what I refer to as the personal negligent trap. Now, the third one is called the personal guarantee or the banker's bypass. So a banker's bypass is pretty common. Again, let's look at, let's say it's real estate now. So we've got a real estate LLC here. So you buy property in a limited liability company. Now, in order to get this loan to buy this property for, let's say you got a loan for $200,000, you're down here as the owner of this LLC. You had to give the bank over here what we call a personal guarantee. That is, you guaranteed the debt for this loan to buy this property. Now, many business owners, if you're running a business, you're aware of this. You sign personal guarantees a lot. Maybe you have a credit card in the name of your business. You've signed a personal guarantee for that credit card. So here's where things run into problems for people. Let's assume that in this case with the property burns to the ground because maybe your tenant was running a meth lab in the basement. You didn't know about it. It blows up, burns this property to the ground. You don't have enough insurance to cover the people that were harmed as a result of it. And I'm not talking about your tenant being injured. How about the next door neighbor whose house basically melted as a result of the fire, the chemical fire that burned here? What about the issue with the environmental cleanup, okay, that comes from this meth lab that burned to the ground? What do you think the bank's going to do? All right, so the banks here now, they're coming after you. They no longer have collateral in this property. The house has been burned to the ground. Your insurance premiums have all been paid out. So now you're stuck with this. Bank comes after you under that personal guarantee. Whoa, I had an LLC set up there. It's supposed to protect me. It doesn't, because the LLC now becomes irrelevant in this situation whenever you've signed a personal guarantee. So we have to be careful there. And that's why one of the strategies we typically teach people is that you don't want to keep a lot of assets in this business here. You want to keep leave enough in there to cover your expenses, but then you want to take out periodic. And you're going to understand why I see periodic distributions in just a moment. And then the other thing is that you should keep in mind is that you want to be protecting your other assets. So if something like this were to occur and they were to come after you, they don't find your personal residence in your own name. They don't find your stock account in your own name. They don't find other real estate in your own name. Because if they do, then that personal guarantee can go after these assets right here as well to make sure they get paid. So that is the third issue that people face, is that bankers bypass personal guarantee. Okay, the fourth one is probably going to shock you, all right? So the fourth one is what we call under-capitalization. And this happens with business owners, okay, a lot, or even real estate investors. Now, here's a perfect example of that. Let's say you have a business right here. Here's your business. And each month you generate, on average, let's say you bring in $3,000 a month. So you're down here as the LLC's member, the business owner. Now, you have an employee, okay? So you're not the one now that is involved in the car accident. You have this employee who's out working for your company, and they're involved in a car accident. They hit someone, and this person's injured. So now they sue the LLC. So in this case, they can sue the LLC and they sue your employee. Remember Sarah? She hit the prized bull, so she got sued. Now, when you have an employee, and this is where businesses shine typically, and that's why people create LLCs, is that if my employees do something wrong, you don't sue me personally, you can sue the employee for their negligence, and you can sue the business. So in this case, they sue the business, and you think, I'm so glad I put together a limited liability company. However, what the victim's family can argue is that when they sue your company, if they find out when they get a judgment against it that the way you've been running your company, meaning you've undercapitalized it, then they can pierce the veil. Now, how do they make this argument to pierce the veil of your LLC and then go after your personal assets? Pay attention, because this is important. Remember I said you made $3,000 a month. Well, here's what you should not do. Every month you pull out the full $3,000. So you leave zero money left in your business. That can potentially be a problem for businesses, because the argument someone can make in this scenario is that this business is undercapitalized, that you never leave them enough money in there for paying its debts. Or worse yet, you don't have sufficient insurance there. So that's another way in which people can come after this business as well, if you're underinsured for the type of business that you're engaging in. So these are two levers that an attorney has in order to bypass the LLC. That's why I said earlier, taking periodic distributions is the way to go. You never want to set up an LLC like this. All right, so here's my business right here, and I bring in $4,000 a month, and every month I take out $4,000, so I start the month with zero money. And I do this every single month, always pull out the same amount. You should not do that. The better way to run a business like this is you bring in $4,000, all right? And so you pay out yourself a salary, okay? Or you put yourself on a standard distribution. Maybe it's $2,000 a month. So I leave $2,000 in the business. And over the period of 3 months, if I'm still doing this, this comes up and it's now sitting at $6,000. And then 3 months later, at that 3-month mark, I decide to I'll pull out $5,500. That's called a distribution. Now you do this again, but rather than pulling it out at the 3-month mark, maybe this time you run it for 5 months and then you pull out the money. All right, so what you're doing now is you're not showing that on a certain time frame, you're pulling this cash out. So somebody can't come back and say, hey, well, look at these distributions that are going out to you on a periodic basis. It's exactly the same amount every single time you pull out all the cash. You want to make it look different, all right, so that there is not a pattern there. Now, the 5th problem you run into with LLCs where they do not provide you protection is with the state or IRS. Okay, and generally what we're talking about there is taxes, especially payroll taxes. So this is the death blow for many businesses. And I actually had a client that went through this where he lives in California, has a business in California, and the state of California reclassified independent contractors as employees. And they made the law retroactive for 2 years. So what occurred is that these ex-employees or independent contractors that he had, they went to an attorney and they said, hey, we should have been employees. We were not. This owner of this business was not withholding and paying our employment taxes. We want to sue him. Under California law, they could sue. So they turned around and they sued the business. But they also got to name the business's owner because the laws state that you can go after the business owner for payroll related issues and taxes. So he got sued personally as a result of this. So even though he had a limited liability company set up for his business, he still became the responsible person. You see, the LLC cannot shield you from unpaid payroll taxes. And this is actually an area that brings down a lot of businesses. They tend to get behind on their payroll taxes when money gets tight. So what do you need to do then? So in that case, you do exactly what I showed you in the example before. You need to make sure that just because you set up an LLC for your business, you need to be protecting your other assets with other limited liability companies. So in this case with the business, maybe you have some real estate. I would have some real estate LLCs over here that holds my property. I'd have all of that in a Wyoming LLC down here for asset protection and anonymity. So now I'm down here, I own this business and I own this business. Maybe you have your cash and your savings and your brokerage account over here in Wyoming LLC number 2. So this is what I refer to as my safe assets right here. Now, what you never do, going back to the first example that I shared with you, right, is move money from here to here, here to here, here to here. Everything would always roll to you personally, and then you move the money where it needs to go. And again, when that money moves down to you, what did I tell you, just get done sharing with you? Do not set it up on a repeating pattern. You want different amounts at different times. This is what you need to be aware of when it comes to running your business. So the correct explanation about LLCs is, hey, they can provide asset protection, but really they help reduce liability. They're not a force field at the end of the day that you can do things that will screw them up. So if you're not aware of this, like separate banking, keeping one bank account for each business entity and don't commingle them, right? Having proper documentation is really important. And as I stated, having insurance. So all those things all play into protecting your assets in the event of a lawsuit. And I'll give you this last story. I'll tell you from firsthand experience. A few months back, we had a client. Their LLC, or actually they were being sued personally. And the attorney that was representing the plaintiff noticed that they had this structure set up like I've been showing you, drawn boxes. We created several entities for this individual, and they could not get after these assets. So they resorted to a veil-piercing argument. What they wanted to do was show that the way in which this individual, our client, was running their business, that possibly they left the door open. So for 4 days, they sat in court trying to make this case. They brought in the operating agreements that we created for our clients. They put all that up and they went through them meticulously looking for ways in which the client didn't follow their operating agreement, distributed money on a periodic basis, which they could just track and say, all right, there's really no difference between you and your entity. They were looking for any ways of commingling. At the end of the day, The documents protected them, the way they ran their business protected them because they respected the LLC. If you respect the LLC, the courts will too. The LLC is only as strong as you and how you maintain it. So listen, if you've got a company right now, follow this video, audit proof for your own limited liability company. Make sure you're doing this. And if you haven't been doing it right, okay, start doing it right. I get that question a lot. Now, if you're in a situation where you've just totally botched it and you're really concerned, here's what you can do. Reach out to us. There's a link below in the show notes for a free strategy session. Go ahead and click on that link, schedule your free strategy session with us, and we'll walk you through what it takes to fix your business. Maybe for some of you, it means setting up a new LLC, taking the LLC that has the problems and shutting it down and making all that liability die with that LLC. Hey, I wish you the very best with your investing and running your business. Take care.